I'm going to kill you.
When people talk about the Inhumans, it's kind of surprising how long they've actually been around, even though they've never fully taken off in popularity the way other Marvel groups have. They first showed up in Fantastic Four number 45, and since then, they've been part of Marvel lore for decades. But even though they have all this history, they've always felt like a group that never quite got the spotlight they deserved. There are exceptions, of course, like Lockjaw, the giant teleporting bulldog who became a fan favorite, especially through his connection with Ms. Marvel. But overall, the Inhumans have stayed in this weird position where they're important, but not fully explored. What makes that even more interesting is that Marvel actually had big plans for them at one point. Kevin Feige openly talked about wanting to make an Inhumans movie as far back as 2012, which shows that the interest was definitely there. And it wasn't just talk, because there was a time when an Inhumans film was officially scheduled as part of Phase 3. So clearly, Marvel saw something in these characters that they thought could work on a large scale. But plans changed over time, and instead of getting that big movie, the Inhumans ended up with a TV series that didn't really capture what made them special. Even though that show didn't land the way Marvel probably hoped, it doesn't mean the idea of the Inhumans is gone. In fact, it almost feels like the opposite, because the MCU has reached a point where it's exploring bigger and stranger concepts, especially with the multiverse saga. And that kind of environment actually suits the Inhumans really well, because their entire concept is already pretty out there. They have a hidden city, usually on the moon, their powers come from their DNA being activated, and their society works very differently from normal human civilization. So even though that might have felt too unusual before, it could fit perfectly now. There's also a theory that the Inhumans might already exist in the MCU, just hidden away and choosing not to get involved in Earth's problems. That idea lines up with how they're usually portrayed in the comics, because they tend to keep to themselves and focus on their own issues. And if they are living somewhere like the moon, it would mirror the kind of hidden presence we saw with the Celestials in Eternals. So instead of introducing them from scratch, Marvel could reveal that they've been there all along, just staying out of sight. At the same time, even though they prefer isolation, the Inhumans don't completely ignore what's happening in the wider universe. Characters like Black Bolt have connections to major events and groups. He's often part of the Illuminati in the comics, which is a secret group of powerful individuals making big decisions behind the scenes. The MCU has already hinted at this idea in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, where a version of Black Bolt appeared. Even though that version didn't last long because Scarlet Witch took him out, it still showed that Marvel is willing to bring these characters back in some form. It feels like the door is still open for a proper introduction later. And one of the biggest opportunities for that could actually be Avengers Secret Wars. That storyline, especially in the comics, is massive, and it involves multiple universes colliding and being reshaped into something new. The 2015 version of Secret Wars shows this really clearly, because the entire Marvel universe and a bunch of alternate realities are destroyed and then merged into Battleworld, a patchwork planet made up of different regions from different universes. In that story, Doctor Doom becomes a central figure, basically ruling over Battleworld as a godlike emperor. And even though characters like Reed Richards and Black Panther lead the final effort to stop him, the Inhumans also play an important role in resisting his control. Members of the royal family are involved in the rebellion, helping to push back against Doom's rule and fight for what's left of reality. So if the MCU adapts something similar, it would make a lot of sense for the Inhumans to be part of that conflict. Even if they haven't been fully introduced before, Secret Wars is the kind of event where Marvel can bring in characters from different timelines or universes without needing a full setup. That means the Inhumans could show up as an already established group, possibly from another universe, and immediately become part of the larger story. That approach would also solve one of the biggest challenges with these characters, which is how to introduce them without slowing things down. Instead of spending an entire movie explaining who they are, Marvel could show them in action first, and then expand on their story later. And if audiences respond well, that could lead into a dedicated Inhumans project after Secret Wars. Another interesting angle is how different the Inhumans feel compared to other Marvel characters. While recent MCU projects have leaned more toward grounded storytelling, the Inhumans are the opposite. They're full of strange sci-fi ideas, unusual powers, and a society that doesn't follow normal rules. So bringing them into the MCU could add a fresh kind of energy, especially if Marvel embraces the weirdness instead of trying to tone it down. That's also why some people think an animated project could work really well for them. Animation allows for more creative freedom, and it would make it easier to show their world without worrying about realism or budget limitations. Characters like Lockjaw, for example, would be much easier to portray in animation, and their powers could be shown in more visually interesting ways. But even if Marvel sticks with live action, the current state of the MCU makes it easier to take those risks. At the same time, there's still some hesitation about whether Marvel will fully commit to the Inhumans again. The previous show didn't leave a great impression, and the studio might be cautious about revisiting that territory. But the MCU has a history of reworking ideas and making them successful the second time around. So just because something didn't work before doesn't mean it can't work now. There's also the question of how the Inhumans fit alongside other groups, especially the X-Men. Both groups share some similarities because they're misunderstood. They have powers that set them apart, and they exist somewhat outside normal society. Because of that, Marvel might be careful about introducing them at the same time, since it could feel repetitive. But at the same time, those similarities could actually lead to interesting conflicts, especially if their philosophies clash. Looking ahead, the most likely path seems to be a gradual reintroduction. The Inhumans could appear briefly in a big event like Avengers: Secret Wars, possibly fighting against Doctor Doom alongside other heroes. That would establish their presence without requiring a full explanation. Then, after that, Marvel could expand their story through a solo project or a series that focuses on their society and their internal struggles. In the end, the Inhumans are one of those parts of Marvel that still feels unfinished. They have a rich history, a unique concept, and a lot of potential, but they haven't had the chance to fully shine on screen yet. And that wraps up today's video. If you want to stay in the loop with all the latest movie and series news, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a big thumbs up, because I'll be bringing you more updates on upcoming movies before they even drop. So keep an eye out for that, along with the latest on your other favorite shows and movies. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.